Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rocky Top Insider Diamond Pass here on this Monday, October 27th edition. I'm your host, Jack Foster, joined alongside Ryan Schumpert, coming at you for a second time in the past 5-6 days-ish, 4 or 5 days maybe. A quick turnaround here as we're going to be talking about Tennessee baseball hiring Josh Elander as its new head coach. Of course, Tony Vitello departing for the MLB to take the San Francisco Giants manager job. Tennessee has named former hitting coach Josh Elander as its new head man, promoting from within. We got a lot to discuss regarding that, his introductory press conference here on this fine Monday, and more. But first, Ryan, how we doing on this Monday evening?
Doing well, yeah. It's been chaotic, but certainly, I think I said last week that I think Tennessee needs to move fast on a hire, and they did just that. 72 hours, really, after Tony made his decision, or at least that it went public, that he was going to San Francisco. Tennessee named Josh Elander its new head coach, and now about 48 hours after that, we met with him on Monday late morning. So it's been a whirlwind, been a chaotic week, but a resolution now, and this Tennessee will move forward under Josh Elander's leadership.
And the right resolution. We talked about it when we were on here a couple of days ago that Josh Elander's the no-brainer hire. And, Danny White announced he was doing a nationwide search. Well, that search lasted just days, just a couple, as Josh Elander was named the head man was it Saturday when it went official?
Saturday, yeah.
Saturday. And the only other coach that was even remotely talked about on a somewhat significant level was Coastal coach Kevin Schnall. And pretty much simultaneously, as Tennessee announced Elander as the head coach, Kevin Schnall tweets to the Coastal fan base. Kendall Rogers tweets out as well that Schnall is, sticking with Coastal Carolina. It wasn't worded as if Schnall pulled himself out of the race because ultimately it didn't really feel like there was much of a race potentially. I mean, but the only other name, Ryan, outside of Elander, which we all knew would be a part of the process, that felt remotely possible was Schnall in this extremely short process.
Yeah, I would say Dan McDonald at Louisville too. There was some real buzz around him on Friday that he was interested in, that there was mutual interest. So really, those were the only two names that there were anything significant with. And I think our buddy Mike Wilson at the News Sentinel reported an interview with Kevin Schnall, which was further than McDonald and the only other one. And
Right.
yeah, no, I thought that was funny. And look, it's a bit of a he said, she said, I guess you could say, but like the timing of it all makes me think that Tennessee called Kevin Schnall or his agent and said, "Hey, we're hiring Josh," because Kevin Schnall removed himself from consideration and then posted that statement. Tennessee would not have had all their T's crossed and I's dotted with Josh Elander a mere 15 minutes later.
Yeah, if that, right? I mean, it was like just a couple minutes, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. So not that it really matters, but I do think this was who Tennessee decided on. They'd done their due diligence. And look, I'd give Danny White a ton of credit. I think I said it last week. I didn't really have. Well, I thought Josh Elander was the best option, and that's who I would have moved forward with. But I said I don't blame him for doing a national search. I think the key is you just have to move quick. You can't meander around. You don't. Signing day coming up, the players have already had a week of uncertainty. You want to limit that uncertainty for them moving forward, and also the fact that, like, just from a respect standpoint to Josh Elander, I think if you would gone on this search for 7-8 days and then hired Josh Elander, obviously you would have taken it. But disrespectful might be a little dramatic, but it would have felt like, oh, we just hired you because we had to. Like, all these other options didn't work. Like I said, this didn't feel this way. It felt like Danny White and his team decided that Josh Elander was the right man for the job. I don't know who else they talked to, and I'm sure they did their due diligence, but I guess that's what I'd say that made sense. I think they went out there, they did their due diligence about the best coaches in the country, the top sitting head coaches, and probably tried to figure out how realistic it would have been to poach any of them. Obviously, Kevin Schnall's an extremely respected and extremely good young head coach, took Coastal to the national championship series in his first year as head coach, and they did all that and decided, all right, Josh Elander, we think he's the best option. So I thought it was a really well-run search by Danny White to just do his vetting and see what was available, see what was realistic without, letting it get drawn out. And obviously the most important thing, landed on a coach that the two of us think was a good decision and will be really effective as leading Tennessee's program.
Yeah, what's been built in the last 8 years, this continues that. You keep that core, you keep the same staff of obviously sans Tony, and maybe changes happen. We'll see what happens outside of Josh, but Josh Elander said in his introductory press conference today that everything is going to remain the same with who he has around him. And the recruits are happy with this decision. You've seen plenty of tweets from recruits and, of course, former players celebrating this move by Tennessee to promote Elander. So there's no backlash whatsoever from this move, not even the slightest bit. In fact, it's all positive. This was the slam dunk hire, and it would have been rocky if this wasn't the move, and all eyes would have been on how Tennessee was going to perform under a new head coach if it wasn't Elander. But this is just continues that great, culture and that continuity that Tennessee needs after building a juggernaut.
Yeah, I think nobody's going to be Tony Vitello. I think it's understandable to think that there might be a step back under Elander, just from the standpoint of program's been the first or second best in the country. So naturally, it might get a little bit worse. Maybe it does stay at the exact same level. That wouldn't shock me. But I think by hiring Elander, the floor is just so high. I think the floor, to me, it feels like, and again, I could end up looking stupid, but I think it's a top 10 program. You're going to have a really, really good staff around him. Josh Elander is a fantastic recruiter, fantastic hitting coach. I do think more the hitting coach aspect, what that looks like as a head coach will be really interesting. And you have really good recruiting classes stacked up in 26 and 27, and you're going to be able to preserve that. So the talent's going to remain really high. You have all of the infrastructure of a really successful program already around them. You don't have to build anything. You talked about that a lot today in the introductory press conference of, it's just more moving forward, and then we'll put some unique stamps on things, but, we don't have to change a whole lot. So I think that we keep the momentum of the program to just keep things rolling while all eyes will be on it as a new head coaching situation, and it should. And he'll be judged independent from what's happened before him, again, as he should. I think from inside the facility, inside the program, it's going to look the same. It's not going to be like a new head coach situation where you have to build your own culture and you have to define roles, and there's going to be a lot of filling out process between coaches and players and stuff like that. Yeah, again, some of the roles you will have some of that just because of everything shifting, but it's going to feel less to me like your normal coaching hire where you have to figure out a lot about a new program. It's sets them up in a situation, hit the ground running.
Yeah, I said on Twitter when Elander was made official, Tennessee remains a perennial contender with Josh Elander. Like you said, floor is super high still with Elander. Maybe the ceiling's not the same, TBD, but I know Tennessee's still going to recruit at a very high level. I know these guys are going to be ready to go every week and are going to compete at a high level atop the SEC. And with this 26 and 27 recruiting class, Tennessee's set up well for a couple years. So yeah, couldn't say better things about this hire and what it means. Going back to his press conference today, we talk about the staff. Obviously Tony's leaving, so maybe we'll see what happens with the others around Elander. But as far as the core goes, and especially Ricky Martinez, everybody else on an offensive side standpoint, there's going to be a job open. Elander's job, right? His previous
Yep.
job. We'll see what happens there, if it's a promotion or if he brings someone in outside the program. But there's going to be someone added to the staff. And then beyond that as well, all these guys seem to be staying in their spots.
Yeah, and look, I think it will be in staff. I mean, I guess I'll start here and try not to ramble as much as I did in my last answer. But I think a general vibe today from Josh Elander was, we got 2 weeks of fall ball left. Let's get through these 2 weeks. Let's finish strong, and then let's kind of reassess and let's make these decisions about what the staff's going to look like. Let's make these decisions about how we have to change some responsibilities and stuff like that. So I personally don't expect anything imminent on those announcements. 100% expect it to be in-house. That's the way he talked about it today. He said, being flattered by the people that have reached out, I think expressing interest in jobs on the staff, but saying, we're gonna take care of the people that are already here. So, what does that look like? Who could the potential candidates be? You said Ricky Martinez. I think he's one that would make a lot of sense. Obviously, played at Tennessee, came back as a student assistant for a number of years, went to, I believe it was New Mexico State as one of their assistant coaches for a year, and then came back to Tennessee. I think I can't remember if it was before the 24 or 25 season. I think before the 25 season. So I think he was not on staff in 24. He would be an obvious candidate. I think if you wanted to stick on the hitting side, and then they could also go with, I think, another pitching assistant coach. Josh Reynolds does a lot of those responsibilities. They added him to the staff before last season, kind of as a Richard Jackson replacement when he went into the private sector. So we saw with Tony Vitello him being having at times having two hitting, fielding, more offensive minded coaches and one just Frank as the pitching coach. We've seen him at times have two assistants who are more on the pitching side and one on the hitting side. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out rule out one or the other. I think Josh being such a hitting guy would make it more feasible to have a second pitching type coach on the staff more than anything. But I think that'll be really interesting. Obviously who's added. I'm sure he's going to do his best to take care of all those guys, no matter who gets that third assistant coach position. And then just I'll be interested to see if Ross Kivett if he becomes associate head coach, or if they just go with the three assistant coach titles and there's not named an associate head coach.
Yeah, I think Ross staying is big. I don't know if there was any doubts as far as if anybody would be leaving, even if Elander got promoted, but all this continuity continuing, I think that's huge for a guy like Kivett to stay as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you just looked at, he's in charge of a lot of the fielding stuff for Tennessee. But obviously is a guy with position player background, so able to work more with the hitters and stuff like that. If Elander has to, obviously his time will be spread a little bit more thin now. And then, he is a little bit of kind of like the GM role. A lot of the portal stuff, I guess I should say, of like player evaluations and helping them target who they're going to go after. Obviously, that's a team effort, but Ross has had a big role in that. So, yeah, that's definitely really big, and it certainly, I that's the thing with all of this. You wondered about like who would go with Tony. I mean, Tony's going to have to, from an assistant coach and standpoint, he's not to surround himself with MLB people. He's not going to be a
Yep.
lot of college people. I do think Q would have been the one you probably could have gotten by with. So none of this stuff necessarily shocking, but still really good. And why we said that it was such a positive, Elander was such a positive choice, because you felt like you could keep everybody together.
Yeah, and by the way, all these guys we're mentioning, Martinez, Q, Kivett, they're all, rock stars in their own right and important to keep, but hiring Elander means you keep Frank Anderson too, who is, a wizard as a pitching coach. He's the man. So to have him stay is huge too. Like if you don't have Elander, it's an entire new staff. You're throwing away what you've got there from a pitching standpoint beyond all of the guys from the offensive side of the ball in a recruiting standpoint. Like Frank staying in itself is massive because of the Elander hire. So yeah, from a staff standpoint, Tennessee set up well. One thing, multiple things Elander emphasized in his introductory press conference, which was amazing, by the way. I thought Josh crushed it. He's a natural in front of the mic. He's going to be great with the media. We've already known this given the times he's stepped in for Tony when he's been suspended. He's a guy that's really good in this setting, and I thought he knocked it out of the park today. But lots of little subtle recruiting pitches baked into pretty much everything he said. We know Josh is a recruiting guy, and it feels like that's already been an emphasis with the Tennessee program, but man, that is going to be a massive emphasis for Elander moving forward.
Yeah, no, I think I wrote it in my takeaways from his press conference. It was always be recruiting, always be recruiting up there for him today. And yeah, I mean, I asked him about it, the standpoint of like, I think this is always a interesting question in today's modern college athletics when someone's going from assistant coach. I mean, we've seen Sark have to talk about it with, the play caller stuff. How do you balance your job's different as a head coach? You're more of a program manager, you're more of a CEO. There's so much stuff that goes into it. How do you balance taking on those responsibilities while still leaning on what you do really well as an assistant coach and what got you to this point to where you can be a head coach at a prominent program? I think the hitting coach stuff will be really interesting. How much of that's what I wonder more about. What I don't wonder about is recruiting. He's going to continue. That is has been as integral as anything that got him to this point, and he is going to continue to be just a relentless recruiter. So that he was emphasizing that today. That didn't surprise me, and that's one area that even past the 26 and 27 classes that we've talked about are already really good. I don't worry. I think Tennessee will continue to recruit at a really, really high level.
Yeah, and you've had written plenty of stories. I think I mentioned this on our podcast late last week, but Elander was the centerpiece of a lot of those. So, yeah, the recruiting has always been good for Tennessee this decade. It's going to continue to be strong for Tennessee. I think if there's one thing we know for sure isn't going to fall off, it's probably that, right? Like maybe the product on the field can take a dip without Tony. I don't think it'd be that big of a surprise if Tennessee's just not a complete juggernaut on the field year in, year out. But from a recruiting standpoint, they are not going to suffer by Tony leaving.
Yeah, especially the high school recruiting, because I think so much
Yep.
about that is relationships. Portal, I wonder a little bit more about, because I think Tony V is just was such a draw to players in
Of
the
course.
portal, and just how Tennessee attacks the portal. Not that I expect it to be radically different or anything. It's just something that we'll be curious to look at when we roll around in the summer, just to see if Josh's approach is any different to what Tony's was. So yeah, I'm completely with you there. And look, like, let's make no bones about it. That's the most important thing. That's the
Recruiting.
most
Yeah.
important thing in college athletics, is recruiting and getting the players. All the other stuff, it does matter, but recruiting is chief amongst them and number one. And I would say, as much as anything, uh, that and probably the staff retention is what gives me a lot of confidence that Josh Elander will be really successful here at Tennessee.
Fresh on RockyTopInsider.com is a Tony Vitello statement about Tennessee baseball hiring Josh Elander. Ryan got that out shortly before we started recording here. Ryan, I'll toss it to you if you want to talk a little bit about Tony's statement, which, of course, like I said, can be found on RockyTopInsider.com. Official statement to Ryan earlier on. Ryan, if you want to talk a little bit about what Tony V said.
Yeah, I'll just read it. I'm incredibly happy for Josh and his entire family, but I'm even more happy for the players. They will be led with character and integrity. He has been and will be the epitome of a coach that players will give their all for. So, uh, you know, we knew Tony would back Josh Elander. When he talked to us last week, a couple of us last week, he didn't, want to make any statements to interfere with the search or step on Danny White's toes or anything like that in the moment. But there was no doubt throughout the whole process that Josh Elander, who Tony thought should get the job and wanted to get the job, and he releases a statement backing him. And then Elander talked today during the press conference that he said him and Tony had a chance to FaceTime, pretty quickly, pretty
Mm-hmm.
short FaceTime on Saturday after he was named, and just kind of shared congratulations and stuff, and says that he's, they obviously are both very, very busy guys at the moment, but was confident in the weeks and months to come they'll probably have more in-depth conversations about things. So certainly that relationship it remains really good. And one thing, this is beside the point, I was just thinking about it today when Elander was kind of going through and thanking all the coaches. It's funny, and it makes sense because this is how Tony and Elander knew each other. But it's like all the
Mm-hmm.
coaches we mentioned that had relationships with Tony that were like the
Yeah,
rivals in the conference are all the coaches that Elander has relationships
exactly.
with. He
Yeah, it
played with
continues that
Sloss.
tree.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he played with Sloss at
four. Mm-hmm.
TCU when Tony was his assistant, and then since he played for Tony, Tony got him, a low-level staff position at Arkansas. So he worked under Dave Van Horn, and then obviously with Tony the last number of years. So it was funny him going through that. Obviously knew all that stuff, but it's and I guess with Schloss, the storyline will probably be heightened because he played for him. It was his college coach. And
Yeah, for
with
sure.
Dave Van Horn, it'll be a little bit lesser because he didn't spend as much time there. And he was just a low-level assistant. But we'll still have those storylines with those same coaches when Tennessee plays Arkansas and Texas.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's a good point there about it kind of being heavier on the Texas and then the not as much on Arkansas moving forward. And one of the for me, my favorite part about Elander's presser was him displaying what his values are and those being so great. I think Elander's values are tremendous, and leading off the thing, pretty much giving credit to those guys, Schloss, DVH. What he said about Tony and the story he told, and how much that relationship has meant to him. Elander's full of gratitude, and I think how he broke down his values and the way he sees how to be successful aligns a lot with Tony V, but I think it's unique enough for him to be his own person and lead his own program as well, of course. And I think if you're a Vol fan, you can't be more happy with the type of leadership you're going to get out of Elander and the staff, of course, that like you've gotten in the past couple of years.
For sure, and this is something I'm hoping to. I don't know if it'll be on the site by the time people are listening to this. It probably won't, but hoping to write sometime later this week. Elander, he's kind of, bit from a personality standpoint, he's a little bit of the black sheep. I've always said in the program where, when he's been mentioned for other head coaching jobs, one of the things I've said that they'll sneakily miss out of him because the first thing is obviously the development of hitters and the recruiting. But Tony and Frank and Kivett, like those guys are madmen. Those guys are psychopaths.
Even Q,
Even
Q's
Q,
silent when in terms of what you see on TV, but in the program, he's a hard ass. Like he's the guy.
yes. And so like in games, I feel like Elander's been a calming presence that they need, and I think will miss that calming presence a little bit if he ever leaves to take another head coaching job. So that was something when I talked to a number of former players last week that I asked them about. It's like, what are their personalities are different? And it was a lot of that stuff. Like Josh is a little bit more calm. Josh is, he's not, I can't remember who said it, but someone was like, Tony's on all the time. Like Tony is the same intensity all the time, where Josh can be a lot more mellow, can be, a lot more intentional with some conversations with you a little bit deeper. But there was also a consensus that was like, don't get any bones about it. When Josh needs to get in your ass, he'll get in your ass about something. So
Yeah.
that was something that stood out, and I think probably you won't see. Like I don't think we're going to see that during games, but it is certainly very important. And I think just kind of to your point as a whole, like this is kind of how I got on this tangent here. Is I think they're very different people, Tony and Josh, but they have a lot of the same things that matter to them, I guess. Tenets of the
Same value
program,
system.
same
Exactly.
values. Yes, that's what I was looking for. Like you're saying, so that value system is very similar, even though they're two very different people.
Right. I thought watching today, and this isn't a diss at Tony or anything. I would rather listen to Tony give a press conference than anyone ever. But Josh does a much better job at like putting his thoughts together. Like
Yeah.
he is his delivery of things he's thinking about is at a higher level. And like I said, he's great for that. And as a leader, I think he's going to be tremendous. And you have a story coming out about it. I've known former players on a friend level, but Elander has touched so many of these guys, in a massive way. So what he means to the players is, so significant. And you saw the players, the whole team, be there for the introductory press conference today. And was Blake Burke's girlfriend went with his wife,
Yeah.
right? So,
Was
those
helping
relationships.
watch one of his kids. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So those relationships have been so strong. They'll continue to be so strong. And yeah, I mean, like we've said, no one can probably be Tony Vitello, but even if Tennessee isn't like that with Elander, it's really hard to see a floor being low here. Like I just can't envision Tennessee being a bottom half SEC team moving forward.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And that's, I think one of the reasons that, we thought it was the right choice. It's just the floor is so high here. And again, it's like we're talking about the ceiling. We don't know. It's like, we're not
Hell, it
saying
could
that
be
they
higher.
can't. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not saying they can't continue to be great and be just as good as they've been. It's just like there's really not a whole lot of area to go but down.
To go up.
They're I would say the second best program in the country right now, and you could certainly make an argument that they're better than LSU, and I would listen. They've been more consistent year in and year out than LSU over the last half decade. So it's just from that standpoint. And yeah, you mentioned a second ago how many all the players were in there. It was on one side was lined with all the players, and on the other side was lined with all of the coaches and everybody on the support staff and stuff like that. I mean, basically everybody was there. It was the most full that I've ever seen the North Studio. I think it's the North Studio. He had a North Studio
Yeah.
at the Neyland Johnson Sports Complex.
I didn't text you that question, but I was like, how in the hell did everyone fit in that room? Like the entire team's there. I know there's a crap ton of media there. TV, you got his family. I mean, probably 100 people in there at least.
Yeah, no, there probably was 100 people in there. Yeah, and I mean administrative type people for
Yeah.
Tennessee. Yeah, all the players were in like the kind of hallway, where you walk in, you kind of walk in a hallway. All of them were
Yep.
crowded in there, basically. I
Gotcha.
imagine packed in there like sardines. Obviously, I couldn't see all of it, but yeah. And also shout out Blaine Brown and Henry Ford. They were the two players that got shout outs from Josh Elander today.
There you go.
Said he can't wait for Tennessee fans to watch them hit home runs.
Yeah. Henry Ford's gonna hit a lot, that's for sure. But yeah, great day with Danny White introducing Josh. Um, I think all the right things were said. Josh Elander's hair made quite the buzz today. I tried to get my hair. It's gonna be bad now, but you can see where I tried to like comb it over like it. But Josh, hats off to you. Ha, no pun intended. But for having that thick of a head of hair in your 30s, because I sure as heck don't, and I'm 23, so I couldn't pull it off. But the hair made the rounds, and it was a good introductory press conference. Ryan, any other notes here before we get on out of here?
No, I don't. I don't. I think we've kind of hit on everything. Yeah, the with what we were kind of joking, me and Ben McKee. We were talking about it last night at the basketball game, where I was like, it's gonna be weird seeing Elander in a suit, and he's like, you think he'll wear a suit? I'm like, he has to. Like every coach
Yeah,
ever in an
got to.
introductory press conference, and it was just like that's. I don't picture Elander in a suit at all. And that was the same thing. He comes in all black suit with the orange tie, black cowboy boots. But in the hair, I was like, I'm sure I've seen you without a hat on before. And
Yeah.
I was just like, I was startled. It was a combination of seeing Elander in the suit and with the hair done like that. I was like, this is taking me back a little bit.
Yeah, the hair was crazy. More so the hairline to me being so like perfect at the front, but still the more jarring part about this whole weekend with Elander is the beard being gone. Like
Yeah,
he
he
looks
looks.
so much different without a beard.
I said I've said for like a long time that like he looks way older than he is. Like learned that he's 34 or 33, over the last couple of years, 34 now. It's like he does not. He looks way older than that. Not like
Yeah.
in a bad way, but he just looks like 40 or something like that. And
Hmm.
then clean shaven, no, he looks 30. Clean shaven, he looks
Yes.
34. He looks exactly his
Very
age.
young.
Yeah, which is
Exactly.
just again crazy is the fact that he got he got that job full time at 25 is kind of crazy to think about.
Yep. That is a good point. But yeah, there are plenty of content on RocketTopInsider.com. We got what Danny White said. We got, watch videos of the players reacting from when it happened Saturday. Tony Vitello's statement, which Ryan told you guys earlier. Just takeaways, full transcripts, anything you could possibly want from Elander's presser and this whole weekend with the reaction surrounding his hire. You can check that out, RocketTopInsider.com. Hit that baseball tab, and you'll see all the info there. But Ryan, I guess no
One
final
thing.
words?
Yes, contract. $1 million,
Mm,
5 year, $5 million, so 1 million a
yeah,
year.
1 year.
Um, Obviously bonus structure in there, buyout 25% of what is left of the contract at any time. For comparison sakes, obviously Tony was making $3 million this past year. Elander was making $485,000, so over doubles his salary. This is crazy just looking back on it. Tony's initial contract at Tennessee to be the head coach, $493,000. So Tennessee, one, I think that speaks to how much college baseball has exploded. I mean, I remember when Tony got his big extension after 21, which I think was $1.5 million at the time. He was the highest paid public, coach at a public university. I think the thought was that Tim Corbin still made more than him, but at a public university where you had to know. And now just 4 years later, 3 years later, he was making $3 million. So it's crazy how those salaries have gone up, and certainly how Tennessee's commitment to its baseball program has increased over the last decade.
Little less than 4 months away until the 2026 season will get underway in Knoxville. Fall ball will wrap here soon, and then before you know it, after the holidays, it'll be preseason, winter workouts, all that kind of stuff, and we'll have you covered for it all. For Ryan Schumpert, I'm Jack Foster. We'll see you next time on the RTI Diamond Pass.